Are we going? Oh, there!
Yay!
Hey.
Hello,
Thanks.
Archie. Archie, you look as if you should be out of Dexter.
Yes, I've there are some bodies.
Dexter, that's
Bodies.
He also looks like he's in the last scene in the film Safe with Julianne Moore, the Todd Haynes film. I don't know if anyone remembers it.
So good.
What is going on, Artie?
I live in Canada's a very bureaucratic country full of bureaucratic nightmares and nonsense. And they're supposed to be renovating my unit for some environmental regulation or something. And it's just hell. So who knows? I don't know. I live inside basically, I mean, I can slaughter as many people as I want, and it's very easy to clean, which is good. But
I was just reading the comments, and Dennis has said,
I know.
Artie has that set up.
I only said that joke there because Dennis said it. I'm influenced too much by him. So I'm just glad they're not fumigating the place for Arties. That's what it looks like. It looks like they've just closed it off. They've said, we have an Artie problem in one of these flats.
It's like a termite tent, but it's an Artie tent.
Anyway.
Hello. Yes.
Hello, everybody.
It's lovely to see you guys too. Lovely. It's been a while. It's been a while.
But it's
very messy.
It's another one of those weeks where you just think, surely this is it. Surely now everyone's going to see that this is a load of bollocks,
Yeah,
like
literal bollocks.
Aren't they? People are. I think it's slowly. It'll be small gains. But today I think was quite a big gain, and we're going to have this mess anyway. But more interesting news from British Cycling today. Very important news, I think. They've listened, and they have gone away and they've said, yes, okay. And they've done what I think is completely fair, just made an open category and a female category. And that's how it should be, isn't it?
Who could complain?
Nobody can say they're not allowed to cycle. They've got trans women now have two categories. They can compete in the men's, like the men that they are, or they can compete in the mixed if they don't feel, like they've got two choices now. Not 0, 2. That's more than one.
Yes, and it's not like we haven't been pushing this idea of open category and female category for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. However, it has been done. And so this puts pay to the, people don't want to out themselves or et cetera. Open is open. Anyone can go in open. Non-binary, anyone who identifies as anything can
Furries,
go into open.
Furries can ride in their fursuits.
Yeah.
So British Cycling, I think, has they've thought about it finally and come up with a workable solution. The last page of their document, though, does still say that they recommend that changing rooms be done by gender identity. So any bloke who feels like he's a woman, although he can't compete in the female category, can use the female changing room.
Wait a second. That's interesting, actually, because that's actually not good enough, is it?
No, it's not.
I think that's a sort of concession. They're like, let's give them something.
No.
It's worse than a concession.
We must make a fucking song and dance about
it. Yeah.
Like the reason, I'll just very quickly say something. The reason I turned down the £200,000 from Hat Trick to walk away from the Father Ted musical, even though it would have helped me and would still help me if I had that money, was because I heard a teammate of one of Leah Thomas's competitors, the mother of one of Leah Thomas's teammates, in tears because she had to explain to her, however old the kid is, 18 years old, whatever it is, that she had every right in the world to insist that Leah Thomas doesn't share her changing rooms. And she was in tears talking about this because she couldn't believe she had to say this to her grown daughter, So I actually think I didn't know that. I think that's outrageous. And I think that's we should really press on, It's
and it's interesting. It's on the last page. It's the final item in the last page. I think they thought,
Really?
you know, that it would just get hidden. It's just there, bit of a concession. But
Yeah.
so on the one hand, they've given, and on the other, they've taken away.
And it's so funny because remember Hannah Mounsey? I'm pretty sure it was Hannah Mounsey, the rugby player who wanted to play. And
Yes.
then they conceded that he could play on the women's team. And then he demanded access to the changing rooms. And then they said, okay, he can use the women's changing rooms, but he needs a partition. And even that wasn't enough. And he huffed and puffed and he made it fit. It's really the changing rooms, I think, is what it's all about. I think Leah Thomas wants access to the changing rooms. I think these rugby players, the changing rooms are actually the main event. I genuinely think that.
Yes, it's so true.
So it's not just a concession; it's the thing they wanted all along.
Well,
you know,
it's everything, though, isn't it? I mean, it's everything. It is literally everything. It's not, you know, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
To have most of the things, because, you know, haven't we been trying to say this for maybe the last decade, that, you know, exactly as J.K. Rowling says, you know, dress however you please, call yourself whatever you want. There are just a few small spaces, services, and sports that should be set aside for women, because our bodies are vulnerable with respect to male bodies in, you know, and in these circumstances it matters. But that's never been good enough. You know, it's, first of all, it was, oh, well, trans women will get beaten up in female toilets, and you're like, well, what about a third space? No, they, you know, they'd be outed, and then you say, okay, well, this third space can be just completely neutral, anyone can use it, and then it's no, because they're women. So there is no, you know, it was never going to be about sort of compromise and let's all live together. It's total domination.
Yeah, that's it exactly. And you know what? We have to recognize that is a part of their success. This movement is basically like a weed. It's just a very hardy, persistent growth that wraps itself around everything it can. You know, and when it fails, it just tries again. It just tries again. But they are tireless, because what this movement is a very wide network of connected busybodies, bullies, perverts, men's rights activists. It's true. Yeah, like failed comedians, you know, like Aidan Comerford.
Well, it attracts. I think it attracts sort of agitators, doesn't it? It attracts people who want to sort of agitate, make a bit of a fuss. You know, there's a lot of sort of, you know, students like wanting to be edgy, wanting to find the next protest, wanting to be part of something, wanting to change.
Yes, and it wouldn't quite be so. It wouldn't be as destructive if it wasn't for the fact that it also attracts the kind of people who, and I've said this before, you know, the only reason they're not serial killers is because of CCTV. There's always going to be a group of people within society. You might call them the bully class or the sadist class. You know, and they will do whatever their times allow them to do. You know, in the 70s, serial killers could have their victims returned to their house. You know, these days, gosh, you can't cut up a body without everybody knowing about it. You know,
I can.
I mean,
you know, so I'm being flippant, but my point is this, right? You know, whenever there's a kind of sadistic part of a lot of human beings and a creepy part of a lot of human beings, and now we have this kind of panopticon where we've all got our eyes on each other. We can all see each other, and we can all kind of report each other if it comes to it. That's what we've all become. We've all become kind of policemen. So all these kind of sadistic impulses in this panopticon are going to go into other areas, and look at all the misery that women have been put through over the last 5 or 6 years. The cases, the fucking, you know, being put in jail for a day.
Definitely punishing, the punishment, the joy of seeing, like, the punishment of well, especially women, is very clear. You know, even today, you know, I see people, like, I sort of tweeted out about the British cycling, and then I said, oh, but actually the changing rooms, and there was like joy from some people saying, "Ha, you thought that you'd won, but actually, look, we've won." And I'm thinking, Jackie, what I want is fucking compromise that we can all work with, so we can get back to just living normal lives. Like, that's what I want. I don't want this. I don't want this fight to carry on forever. I don't want to. I don't want total domination. I want a nice compromise that we can all just go back to our normal lives.
Yeah, well, it's like an unbearable lightness of being progressing in society right now. Gay rights had seemingly been in the bag. We seem to be making so much progress. The civil rights movement is really taking strides. Everybody wants to be woke now. Everybody's on board with making the world a more socially just place. And that seemed to be leaving a vacuum in everybody's souls where they need something to be angry about and something to push against and something to riot about. And it's also, there's a void in men's souls where they want to dominate, and they're very, very, a lot of men are bitter and resentful that they've lost their sort of top of the totem pole position. And all of these sort of underneath the surface feelings seem to be coming up through trans activism. It's not against the law for a man to wear women's clothes and express his gender expression anymore. That's what this is supposed to be about. And there's nothing to push back against because it's perfectly legal. You can wear a blouse anywhere you bloody want, That's why are they pushing and pushing and pushing? They need to say that they're being genocided and their lives are at stake. It's like, no, you've got everything you want. You can walk down the street, wear stupid coral lipstick, it's all legal, and women can take testosterone and they can grow facial hair and they can be as butch as they want, and people don't mind. And a lot of people find it, they've got what they need to build happy lives. They're not being oppressed. But that's not enough. There's a void there. We need something to push against,
And also, you'll notice that when it comes to the very hard line positions, the hardest line positions are the ones on males. There can never be any kind of shifting to do with males, but with women, you never even hear about trans men for many reasons, because trans men are not a threat to women. Trans men aren't going to start winning men's medals. Trans men are not a threat to women in the same way that trans women are a threat to men. So the fact that compromise doesn't even come into it when it comes to trans men, because they're invisible. They just disappear, Whereas trans women are forcing their way into all these different groups where they are either at an advantage, or it doesn't make sense that they're there, or it's
oh my god, yeah,
it's inappropriate.
It is. Well, but what was I saw this story had resurfaced this week about that bloke calling himself Lauren Plesker. I think it was Lauren Plesker, who was put in prison, I think back in 2016 or maybe 2018, for stabbing the race organizer of a fell run, I believe it was, because not he was trans and he did the stabbing. He did the stabbing because the race organizer would not let him compete in the female category. This was a direct consequence of somebody saying, no, you are a man, to him. And what's really interesting is that today, that statement by Emily Bridges, did you see it?
I didn't see the statement, no.
Yeah.
So the Emily Bridges statement, so Emily Bridges is one of the sort of trans cyclists in British cycling. The statement was phenomenally hyperbolic and over the top, saying, so British cycling are complicit in violence. This is the first step in the road to genocide. I don't even know if I can cycle anymore. I think I'm going to have to leave the country. Just, not, oh, okay. I can see the reason here. It's just anger and fury, utter sort of narcissistic rage. And I do think it's a massive problem, because it's the same sort of narcissistic rage that you could see in Plesker. It's the being told no, but being told no, you're not actually a woman. And I do think it's a massive problem that you've got sort of lots of people saying, oh, be kind, and you are a woman, and then some people saying, no, you're not. And honestly, like most of the people saying, no, you're not, apart from the you know, there's two guys and a woman here, but you know, for a long time, most of the people saying you're not are women. And society's actually trying to push these men into women's spaces and saying, oh, well, you know, you can like complain after the fact if you get hurt or if somebody is behaving inappropriately. But what you're doing is you're pushing the men who really shouldn't be in there.
Yeah.
Like really shouldn't be in there. Because if you're a woman in a female space and you're going to say to somebody like this, actually, you shouldn't be here, you're a man, these are the worst people to tell, because they are going to exhibit narcissistic rage.
Yeah, they're unstable
in many cases.
Yeah.
And it is, you know, and it is a massive issue that people seem to want to ignore.
Well, I remember when I remember thinking, not really realizing it, because it was the days before I was kind of switched on to what was going on. But my ex-wife was in a roller derby team.
Nice.
Yeah. And
roller derby, I'm sure, is chock full of trans, because it's very punky and alternative-y and queer-y, but also it's contact. And a lot of these aggressive guys, they want to ram women, you know.
So what it is, and I didn't put it together. I just thought, oh, this is a mixed sport. I thought, oh, that's weird, a mixed sport. And well, it's not a mixed sport, but there's some men who get sadistic pleasure out of hurting women in roller derby, and they're on these teams. And I knew someone who apparently was I can't remember what it was. It was someone some kind of official thing to do with roller derby, and it was a meeting, and a trans woman wanted to join the team, and they just thought, well, it's just one person, you know. And like the next thing, roller derby became the first, I think, or certainly one of the very earliest sports to be completely invaded by these sadistic men, you know. So it's, I mean, here's the thing. Basically, if you want to be on, it's like that old joke that Gore Vidal said about running for president. He said, anyone who wants to run for president should automatically be disqualified from doing so.
Yeah.
Same is true for anyone who wants to play contact sport with a woman.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you saw the photograph recently of the guy, I think it was Australian football, which is an unbelievable, probably more violent than any other sport, I think, in the world. And there was a guy with tattoos all over his arm. He looked like he just got out of prison, playing these women half his size, you know? And a woman is going to be killed. A woman's going to be killed, and everyone will say, well, how could we possibly know that this would happen, you know? It drives me mad. That's the thing that makes me most angry about this, is that we have to actually see people being hurt before people realize how stupid all their beliefs are. You know?
But I'm not, and I don't even know if they will, because you know, you see goalposts being moved all the time. I entered into a conversation this morning because I knew what would happen, and I just thought it would be interesting to watch the progression of it. First of all, it was, you can't name one trans woman who's won in elite sport. And so, you know, so somebody mentions what the cyclist, what's his name, Austin Killick, the Tour of the Gila winner, and then suddenly it changes from winning to domination.
Yes.
But they're not dominating the sport, and also it's not elite. And then somebody is like, "Can you name 3?" And you're like, "This, it's never ever going to be enough." I mean, never ever.
But you know, part of the problem there is that I have to say, is that Twitter is the arguing website. It's like, you know, anything you put down there is going to get someone saying the opposite thing, just to
ain't that the truth?
Just to engage with you. So, unfortunately, we're in this sort of position where Twitter is not a great tool to have these conversations, but it's the only one we have, you know. So it's
Twitter has been good for, at least for people being able to find out, you know, find people, find information. You know, obviously the information you find depends on the information you're looking for, but it has made people being able to make connections. You know, we've got a massive amount of turban now. We're huge. We are legion in a way that we weren't before. And this has happened, you know, pretty much sort of via Twitter. you're right. At some point, it's people on the ground writing to their MPs, sort of signing petitions, actually walking around, knocking on doors, changing minds. But Twitter has been good for, at least, I think, maybe formulating the arguments, seeing what the sort of standard arguments, the standard responses are, so that you can sort of try and formulate questions or arguments around that sort of cuts to the heart of the issue for kind of normal, for the sort of average person on the street.
Yes,
yeah, like it's like a debating rehearsal space kind of thing where you can get all these. It's a training ground for debating the issues. This is how I felt when I used to argue with Scientologists all the time on forums, and I gained so many skills, and I learned so much insight into how human psychology works and how to persuade people and how to change minds and how to get through to people who are very, very hostile to you. And I see a lot of that on Twitter too, especially the way you use it, Helen, because Helen, you use it to sort of to get into very polite disagreements with people, to challenge people in this very polite and firm way. You use Twitter in a way that's really, really interesting. I just kind of use it to say things randomly that come into my head or to yell at people who piss me off.
Like people say to me, get a hobby. Like, haven't you got a hobby? And I think, like, genuinely, this is my hobby. I like this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's kind of like playing a computer game where your character is very overpowered, and you can probably beat the bosses as long as you play it in the right way. Like, these people are no challenge, and it's actually quite like fun to bat them about. For the benefit of others, because I do think like here's my problem. It's 6 years of doing this shit, and I'm sick of the same arguments, and I'm sick of the same bad faith actors in this. They're just fucking rotten pieces of garbage, and they've taken up too much of our time. So I'm getting a little bit bored of the repetition of that. But I have to say though, like, you're right in that we have taken all their arguments, all their concepts, and we've subjected them to some pretty extreme stress testing, and none of their shit holds up. Nothing holds up. It was a big social movement, and we've examined it from all sides, and we can honestly say that it's a busted flush.
I think so.
No debate. Well, we've had all the debate in the world. We have, like, there's a line where before you put an issue to bed, you have to make sure that it's been argued to death, so to speak. Like, before you say that something is done, you have to make sure it's done. And this is done now. There is no argument anywhere on planet Earth where biological sex is a spectrum and trans women are women. It's just not there. That is done and buried and dead in the water. We know that males and females are different. We know that it matters in society. There's nothing that anyone is ever going to be able to say otherwise. Unfortunately, though, I'm so sick of arguing these basic points too. Yeah. But I'm watching the United States just start to pick up more and more on it. Like yesterday, Elizabeth Spears, who's a Democratic politician and writer at the New York Times and a very famous lefty in the U.S., she's like, well, I would box with a trans woman one time. Therefore, trans women should be able to box women all the time. It was like, why are you so stupid? They're like 5 years ago. That's something you would have heard in UK Twitter 5 years ago that you would never hear today, No. So they're just popping their heads up and saying dumb stuff. Yeah.
Also, but that's another thing. But I do think that's another thing. And it's really important for people to see the ratios of what's happening, because it actually, there's loads of people who don't say anything, but do read. It was like when Nancy Kelly tweeted out that petition of, it was something, it was another, males and females sports one. And it had, by the time the petition was actually deleted, it had had 2.5 million views.
Wow.
And it had 1 positive response and about 200 likes. And I do think that ratio is important. It's important for Nancy Kelly to see, because, you can't tell me that she didn't see it. She saw it. And it's important for everyone else to see. Because Twitter in a way, sorry, I just finished my chain of thought, because Twitter in a way, although, there is no real winning of an argument because it can just go on for ages, but there is in a way, an informal adjudication, isn't there? Because you can see it from these ratios, what people, you know, like you've basically got an audience sort of sticking their hands up, you know, and you say, okay, this house has won and this house hasn't. And that I do think is important for people to see, because, you know, a lot of
I
these...
totally know what you're saying. I think you're right. It's a very, and you know, but again, I just think, you know, well, maybe now is the time where we get to enjoy a little bit how isolated they look. I don't know if you saw any of the photographs from the hilarious Saudi Arabia funded rainbow rights thing. Basically, every time you see one of these,
Brought to you by Raytheon, was it? Just like
something, yeah, it was hilarious. Every time you see one of these wankathons, Linda Riley's always in shot somewhere. You know, she's like the Zelig of LGBT Inc. But she basically, like, you can see her in every shot looking desperately unhappy, I have to say, because she knows the jig is up. Now what it is they're pumping money into it. Like, I don't know if you saw another hilarious Nancy Kelly tweet where she goes, "We just got £5,000 for being the best blood, you know, charity in the UK, given to her by a pharmaceutical company, I think it was." Like £5,000. How much does Stonewall bring in? 67 million a year? This some crazy figure.
yeah, that's like a shrinking.
Yeah. And it's like they're delighted because they got a giant check for $5,000 at a made-up Rainbow Award thing, you know? I mean,
Oh, yes, I saw that. Yeah.
Desperate suddenly. It suddenly feels like
Yeah.
It does.
It feels
Well,
like it feels like they're in the Winter Palace, you know, they're like the Russian royal family. And they're throwing parties and pretending, and Rasputin is still telling them what to do. And they're going, "Yeah, good idea."
And there's a fire right outside the window.
Yeah. But reality is just kind of creeping in, you know? And I don't know. I'm enjoying all that stuff. Enjoying it.
Well, two things about that. In the UK, there's kind of like a little bit, it seems like there's kind of they know they're way on the back foot in their corner, and they're kind of mounting a little bit of an attempted resistance, like the attempt to push back against the Cass report, which is ridiculous. The attempt, which we have to talk about, on Baroness Faulkner and the EHRC.
Yes,
we have to talk about that. So there's a bit of a sort of an attempted pushback. They're not going to go down without a fight, but they're definitely going down. And you really see that this is their sort of last, you know, their Alamo moment. But everything that's going on in the UK is so important for the US, because the US is so far behind. Like, they had their just first whistleblower a few months ago about pediatric transition, and the left-wing media in the US has just ripped that woman apart. You know, they won't listen. So you need the UK.
Who did they rip apart, Artie?
There was a woman who was a whistleblower about the scandal of pediatric trans. I
remember her.
And she was super left wing, and she's married to a trans man, and she's just like the perfect example. Didn't matter. Chris Hayes, like they just dug into her. They didn't dig into what she was saying. They tried to what do you call it?
They did Oppo research.
They did Oppo research, and it was like destroying her personality, attack the person kind of thing. It's disgusting. So we need to sort of tie everything up with a nice bow in the UK, so that we can go back to assholes like Chris Hayes and all these people on the left who are just like, who are people I used to ally with, who now I just think are total scum in the way they're behaving around this issue. I'm just shocked at their despicably unethical behavior. And say, look, this is coming. There's nothing you can do. It's already done in the UK, you know. And then they can scream and shout all they want that children aren't being harmed by pediatric trans medicine right now, but we already know that it's happened in Europe. You know, the US does have a tendency to kind of ignore the rest of the world and pretend that everything outside of its borders just kind of is a weird thing that doesn't count. But eventually, when the whole rest of the world has shut down, the affirmation model, and the US is still going at it, they're going to have to wake up. You know.
Let me introduce a note of slight pessimism, because I think that's a very optimistic view. One of the things I think we have to bear in mind is that, as someone put to me the other day, this is a war of attrition. You know, they basically, like we saw with Baroness, what's her name again?
Faulkner.
We saw with Baroness Faulkner that they did with her what they do, what someone like our Scottish actor friend would do with a YouTube video. They hear it, he hears his name, he reports the video, he does it in such a way that he successfully gets it taken down. If he didn't do it, someone else would do it. And basically, as I say, this is a loosely connected network of bullies, busybodies, sadists, and all sorts of different people, And unfortunately, luckily, the spotlight shone on what was happening to Baroness Faulkner. But, people are going through this all the time in different jobs. Rachel Mead, is a social worker who's been fighting this for 2 years. And Social Work England smeared her and me on their website. I'll give you a very interesting fact about that case. One of the reasons that Rachel Mead was facing sanction was because she shared my blog, and Robin Moira White, who's the male trans-identified barrister who took the case, he used this as he used the fact that I had been cautioned by the police as a way of attacking Rachel Mead. Now, there is no way that Robin Moira White would not have known that the source of that complaint about me was Stephanie Hayden, a bloke who's been in jail for passing bad checks in Wales, a bloke who's had multiple identities, but because it was, and who's been credibly accused of posing as a conveyancing lawyer and stealing £27,000. So for Robin Moira White to use that story as evidence against me when they know full well Hayden's background just shows that even people, as well regarded as a top barrister like White is, will still use this kind of. They'll use everything they can. They will twist the truth. They will use the testimony of chancellors like Stephanie Hayden, and they will keep making reports.
It's Scientology. They'll just do everything they can. Every tool at their disposal, even if it's the least credible thing, they'll just throw anything they've got, to try to build up their case. Their space alien mojo, or in this case, gender soul mojo.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
But one thing I was thinking about this, looking around today, I noticed that people like Owen Jones. I mean, Owen Jones obviously he's blocked me. Billy Bragg finally blocked me, but I've noticed that there's nothing. Owen Jones isn't like making a massive fuss anymore. I'm wondering if he's reading the writing on the wall and thinking he's going to tone it down. He's just been tweeting about the Labour Party, etc. He's not really mentioned trans stuff for a while. Maybe he just hasn't had anything to say. But I'm wondering whether he's beginning to think, I'll just step it down a little.
Yeah, just slowly back away. Like there was never just one day where Roseanne Barr just decided she didn't have multiple personalities anymore. What happened is she just quietly stepped away from talking about her multiple personalities, And I think Owen Jones is not going to one day announce that he's no longer a trans. He's just quietly slipping away. And then a few years later, he's going to be like, yeah, well, I may have made some mistakes were made. Yeah,
no, I'll make sure people never forget about what he did. I'm sure people never forget.
That's like the one thing that keeps me going is years later, I'm going to remind everyone of the bullshit they did. I am absolutely not letting this go. I'm so hurt by some of the treatment I've gotten from some friends and from people who should know better, and they will never forget. That's the one thing that keeps me going is that I will win this and you will regret it.
Unfortunately, as we all know, I guess that's what my point is about the war of attrition. It's simply that we have a system again. The way I often talk about the twin tiers of reality. Where we have like Fox News viewers believing in one set of realities and Guardian readers believing in another, TERFs in a third, there's like three completely different versions of what's going on out there. I can't remember what my point is simply that like also, there's a kind of a superstructure of these people implanted in organizations all across the UK. I obviously know one of them in Hat Trick, who's stopped the Father Ted musical from being made. There's also in the civil service, because of what just happened to the Baroness. We know they're in the police force. We know they're fucking definitely in universities. They're heavily represented in academia. So the problem is we're going to have all of these people still writing their letters of complaint, still trying to get women shut down on bogus charges of bigotry, because they've been provided a huge range of tools to do so. And they know they'll get a sympathetic ear from, dodgy people who are...
I mean, you're absolutely right. We cannot take our eye off it. We can't think, okay, look, we've got a win here with British cycling. Things will change. Things will only change if we force them to change. Like people, all of us have been pushing and pushing and pushing against this sports thing for years. And this was the easiest thing to win. I mean, this should never have been a thing. Like, how did we even get to the stage where people are literally, and I mean literally in the literal sense, arguing that male people don't have an advantage over female people. That women should just try harder. And actually, it'll be good for women to have to try harder because it means they'll get faster. I saw this one today.
Real argument.
Women have got faster. Yeah. So they need this. They've been resting on their laurels far too long.
But I think what's really going to happen, what has to happen, is that we have to have there has to be kind of like an economic change in society, because this is really about power. All these people you were talking about, Graham, who it takes one person in an institution to make a fuss. They're trying to wield power, and all these academics. They have no power anymore. Young people have no money. They're never going to be able to afford homes. They're trying to find power. They're trying to find control. They're trying to find a way to matter in society. And they're grabbing at this as a way to pull at other people. So I think ultimately, and you see this in the US, everything is left-right culture wars. People are just fighting over control of the narrative.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think what's really going to end up changing this and making it all go away is like a massive economic restructuring. Like maybe AI is just going to get rid of a swathe of jobs and we're going to have to introduce like universal basic income or something crazy. Or maybe there's going to be some kind of economic supply chain problem around the world. Something's going to make everybody stop. And it's really going to sort of stop the machine. And we'll have to take a look around at how society is structured a little bit. I know this sounds like
World War II? World War II finally giving women the vote. Because they're like, oh, well.
I think we all like there's a whole lot of people who just feel deeply disenfranchised. There's a whole lot of people who just feel like a lot of kind of subconscious malaise. I don't know if that's the right term, but like there's something going on in society that's broken, and it's all just kind of being fed into this gender insanity. So we really have to sort of step back and fix problems overall before this actually ends up.
I think we've said before that this is. I mean, I may be sort of naively unpolitical here, but for me, it seems to me this is the first big sort of political battle that has been fought on the internet, on Twitter. Like the first civil. I say civil rights because it isn't a civil right for a man to be able to enter in. Do it, pretend he's a woman, and
everything. But it's a civil rights conflict because it's about
comes after that. The pretense that it is a civil rights fight, but this is the first one that has been done this way with, and everyone is still, finding things that they can do to try and win, and a huge part of that has been lies, just lying, outright lying and propaganda. And and I have to say, trans activists have done propaganda in a way that we have not, like massive amounts of propaganda, starting from the very simple trans women are women, trans rights are human rights, it in a way that we've not really had to, because for me, I thought, well, I mean, this is just obvious, isn't it? It's just obvious and rational. And I think, in a way, we've kind of been back-footed on that.
Sure.
Because of the motivated, the absolute motivation that the other side have got to try and sort of smash this through. But slowly, I think there is some rationality and sense coming back in. But but it needs still to be sort of disseminated far more widely.
Well, hopefully this will kind of inoculate us a bit. Like, if this was the first time social media is being used by a small and nefarious campaign to insert propaganda in society to get what they want, and they're doing that, and we're fighting back and we're winning, maybe we're building up an immune system. Maybe we're learning that social media is a platform where people can inject very, very toxic ideas into our society and destabilize society. And now we've learned from this one, the next time like Russia or China tries to meddle and insert something into our society through social media, we can maybe head it off. Sorry, Graham, I cut you off. You were saying something.
No, I totally agree. I think that's a really good point. And I have to say that I think that, my distrust of Twitter as a medium, I think if we are almost without realizing it, inoculating ourselves against these types of things, great. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, I still think that, like, again, I just think it's the medium. I think Twitter is just a place where, it's the argument room in Monty Python. Do you remember that sketch? I've come in here for an argument. No, you haven't. Like that's what it is, and
that is exactly what it
is. But like the thing is, there's a if that has some sort of positive effect in that it's helping people deal with logic, and I've been introduced to some fantastic concepts through you, Helen, Chesterton's fence and things like this. It's been brilliant and very instructive, but at the same time, I just wonder if all this fuel wasn't being poured into Twitter, would we be getting more done? Like when I was banned from Twitter, my Substack was fucking flying. I was like, chucking stuff every day, because partly because I just felt it was so urgent to get this stuff out, but Twitter comes out.
Well, it does, but like I said, but you being on Twitter has piqued a lot of people. You've reached a lot of people who have seen things. And then people go offline. I see people say all the time, oh, how often do these conversations happen in the pub, in the hairdresser? All the fucking time. Yeah. All the time. Everyone talks about it. It's incredibly important. And now, we've said this before, half the battle, for me, a great half of the battle was getting the message out there that there was a problem. For years, people would say, there's no problem. What are you talking about? You're nitpicking. I've said this so many times. But now, at least, you talk about it, everyone knows. And most people actually would secretly like to talk about it. Most people that you talk to, secretly, they whisper, well, I don't really agree with, men and women's sports. I mean, people obviously, people feel as if they're born in the wrong body, blah, blah, blah. Everyone really kind of wants to be kind and nice. And you want a society where everyone wants to be kind and nice. But realize that, there are some limits to what people can ask for and can be given. And that society is a compromise. Living in society, the social contract is a compromise. And that seems to have, the idea of it seems to be now genocidal.
You're right. We need to bring civics back. Like basic school, you need some basic civics, like that, rights need to be balanced, and that like people need to have voices, and you can't shut down debate. All these very basic sort of societal benchmarks: freedom of speech, competing rights, compromise, own your own. You have to own your agency, and you have to be responsible for your own body. You have to understand the material reality trumps all these very, very basic, fundamental, like ground level things that we need to know for society to function have all just kind of fallen apart. Freedom of speech is a right-wing dog whistle now. Where the hell did that come from? Reality isn't real anymore. What the fuck,
schools would be so much better having, a couple of lessons just teaching kids about logic, the societal contract,
Yeah.
And you
Oh,
know,
completely.
as
You know what
you
they're
say,
doing instead? They're
civic
going into schools and
responsibility.
spending
Oh yeah,
millions of
know.
dollars teaching them that, you know, gender
Yeah.
identities matter and that you can cut your tits off and become a guy or cut your cock off and become a girl. They're teaching kindergartners this. Like, what? You know?
I know, I'm laughing because of the amusingness of hearing you say it and the fact that it's fucking true.
The billions of dollars is like armies of people are amassing online and they're organizing this. And they're in Canada, it's insane. The materials that are going into schools. This is like a crazy army of crazy people who are just marching in and taking over. And we're watching it happen. All of the schools are just being completely just trampled on by this army of lunatics who have bought into this. And nobody's stopping it.
Can I ask a question about Canada? Do you think Canada is actually too far gone?
No, I don't think it's too far gone. I think there's a pushback. Canada's a very strange country because it's so spread out. There's many different Canadas. You know, we're more than 1/4 of the circumference of the globe. We're very far apart, and sometimes we have a hard time hearing each other because we're so far apart, and we're just so culturally different. We're in very different climates, very different parts of the world, different time zones. So there is a lot of anger and resentment and pushback at what's going on with the government. I'm not sure how to tie all this into a neat point, but it's just whatever seems to be the zeitgeist leading at the moment in Canada can easily switch when another part of that splintered population sort of takes the conch for a little while. I think our current government has to go. I've been a Liberal and NDP voter. It's like the Lib Dems and the Labour kind of analogy my whole life, and now I still don't want to vote for our Tories, but I would never vote for the Liberal Party again. I'm so sickened by what our Prime Minister has been doing, and I'm so sickened by on all the levels, on the provincial levels, the municipal levels. All the Liberal and NDP politicians and Green politicians have behaved despicably.
They have.
Yeah.
One of the things that have shocked me most is how like an entire country seems to have been captured, like Canada. It really is incredible how what has happened in Canada, you know, and like again we've said it so many times. I mean, I see your point, Graham, about us, you know, sort of making the same arguments again and again, but it has astounded me how this issue has come along and people have elected to be stupid rather than reasoned, and like genuinely like decent people, thoughtful, interesting people have elected to make themselves stupid.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I want to say about Canada,
rather than come out on the side of women.
Yeah. To answer your question more directly, Graham, is Canada too far gone? I think the answer is ultimately no, because Canada's really good at undertaking massive reform. Canada as a country, we know how to rally together and undertake massive systematic reform. We did this when we introduced universal health care, which the US just can't do. We've done this with our immigration policy and multiculturalism, and we've done this with our economic system. We kind of uproot and rebuild quite frequently as a country, so we're good at that, and that's going to have to happen. There's going to have to be one of these everybody come together, we have a big project, we have a mess to clean up kind of thing, and I can see Canada actually stepping up and doing that in the next 20 years. So that's a great phrase. Yeah,
reassuring thing to almost end on. Can I tell my last thing that's computer game related but also turfy related? The Hogwarts game finally clicked for me. I don't know if either of you have been playing it or people.
No, I bought it and I put it down because there's too much Zelda going on right now. But anyways, yeah.
Well,
no, I've got to wait till after the A levels, and then I've promised my son that I'll buy it and we can play it together.
It's very good. It takes a while before it actually starts opening up and becomes and it's worth going online and doing a few of those little tips to figure out how to play. But my God, is it a good game? You know, it's actually kind of hilarious. They tried to boycott it because it's so fucking good that no boycott would ever have worked on it. You know,
it really didn't, did it? It was a very damp squib.
Yeah, everyone basically said, "Fuck you guys, we don't care," and they bought it and they made. Even though they were all saying, "Oh, it's a genocide if you buy it," and they were
well, video games is such a strange. Video games is dominated by young nerdy males, and young nerdy males are kind of the kinds of people who don't care too much about sort of social justice issues on the one hand a lot of the time, but on the other hand, they also dominate trans activism. It's a white, so there's a sort of strange. A lot of nerds who play video games a lot, like these nerdy guys are like, I don't care about this issue. And a lot of other nerdy guys are like, I'm the one this is my rights. I'm the trans woman. You know?
They've all secretly got the game. They've all secretly got the game.
I'll tell you what it is. I think but I think you're right, Helen. And I think that points to a kind of one of the reasons why they came so hard against J.K. Rowling, you know, because I have to say, one part of this movement is a real sense of arrested development. You know, people who want to just stay in childhood. The fashions are all like fucking romper suits, and you know, like it's really just child
infantilism.
Infantilism. That's the word. And I think that's why they hate it so much that J.K. Rowling's a TERF, because they want to have both things. They want to have their lovely fantasy world in both the books and also in the real world, and they can't have both, you know, which is what makes them. So
that's another point for that civics class. You got to teach these kids, you got to grow up. You can't be a child your whole life, you know, these sort of basic lessons. I'm starting to sound like Jordan Peterson a bit. 10 life lessons for all you kids.
This is such a good this is such a good point. Yeah, it's true.
Anyway, well, listen, that's 50. I think that's a good, unless there's something I've missed.
No, this is great. It's a lovely start to the bank holiday weekend.
Oh, you guys have great. Good for you guys. That's great. And congratulations. There was good news on the AHRC front. There was massive pushback. Baroness Faulkner had a lot of people standing to her defense. And that's basically evaporated.
Oh, that's been a total disaster. We didn't really get into too much of that, but that has been a total disaster. They've
suspended the inquiry.
What they've done is they've exposed that these people are vexatious, you know, petty busybodies. You know, that's all they are. And they've basically, again, just one of these wonderful things that's rebounded on them. It's just revealed not only that these trans activists are vexatious lunatics, but also that people like Channel 4 are helping them and encouraging them. You know,
fucking Channel 4 are the ones who are the big losers in this whole dispute, because they wrote that terribly biased piece. I hope she still sues them. I think there's talk that she might. So Channel 4 are the ones who are like maybe going to have to wake the fuck up and, you know, do some woke fumigating, put some of this stuff up, fumigate for some of their woke termites.
Yeah. Well, as presuming I'll see you again after your date with Jeffrey Dahmer, Artie, I will see you, and then I will see you next time. I have a feeling it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks, and I am just coming out of a big project, so I shall be available for more chatting. But
let's do more messes. This has been such a fun one. This has been such a fun one. It's so lovely to see you guys.
Great.
And hopefully we'll be podcasting it too. Sorry, we did have a delay in that. I needed to delete a few files on StreamYard. We've done that, so hopefully this will be available as a podcast too. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you in a week or two.
Yeah, see you soon.